Hi everyone, welcome back. It's Tuesday, March 31st, 2020. I have a good cartoon for the last day of March today. It says, "It's March 31st, out!" So here goes the little lamb out the door going, "Bah, bah." So today is definitely like a lamb day as far as the weather goes. So I've been to school today. I've loaded my truck with all kinds of activities from our classroom. So the next few weeks, hopefully, we'll be able to do some fun games together and keep learning along the way. Also today, I'm going to read from Magic Tree House, Civil War on Sunday by Mary Pope Osborne, chapters 3 and chapters 4. Chapter 3, Field Hospital. Jack and Annie walked with the soldiers into the camp. Outside one tent was a long line of men in torn blue uniforms. They looked tired and hurt. Many were barely able to stand. Women wearing dark dresses were giving out food and water to the men in line. "Where are we?" asked Annie. "I'll find out," said Jack. He pulled out their book and found a picture of the campsite, and he read. Now this is the part that is the factual part, or the nonfiction part of the story. During the Civil War, field hospitals were set up quickly near battlefields to treat wounded soldiers. Soldiers stayed in the field hospitals for a short time before going back to fight or moving to a larger hospital, or, better, being sent home. This field hospital in Virginia took care of over 400 patients. "Wow, that's a lot," said Jack. "It sure is," said Annie. He pulled out his notebook and wrote, "Field Hospital, set up near the battlefield." Jack read aloud again from the book. More than 3,000 women helped out as nurses during the Civil War. Nursing was a new job for women in America. Before the war, only men were nurses. "Wow," said Annie, "maybe we can be nurses." "Forget it," said Jack. "Kids can't be nurses." Jack wanted to find the special writing for Morgan and go home. The sad scene at the field hospital was making him not feel so well. "I'll just ask," said Annie. She headed over to the nurse cooking over a campfire. "Annie, we've got to finish this mission," said Jack. But Annie kept going. So once again, Annie's the brave one here, and Jack's the one that wants to go back home. Jack heaved a sigh. He tucked his notebook and the Civil War book under his arm and followed her. Waves of heat rose from a small cooking fire. The young nurse was heating a pot of coffee. Flies buzzed everywhere. "Hello," said Annie. The nurse barely smiled at them. Her face was red and beaded with sweat. Her eyes looked terribly tired. "Where are you from?" she asked. "Frog Creek," said Annie. "We'd like to volunteer as nurses." The young woman didn't seem at all surprised. "We could certainly use some help," she said, sighing. "Some of us have not slept for days." "Why not?" asked Jack. "Well, the wounded are coming here from battlefields near Richmond," said the nurse, "and more keep coming. It never ends." "Just tell us what to do," said Annie. "While we feed the patients, you can go into the first 2 tents," the young nurse said, "and give the other soldiers their noon meal." She pointed to a basket filled with bread and potatoes. Next to it was a ladle and a bucket filled with water. "Anything else?" Annie asked. "Just try to give comfort," said the nurse. "How do we do that?" asked Annie. "I don't have time to show you," the nurse said, "but here's a list of things that may help." She pulled a piece of paper from her apron pocket and handed it to Annie. Annie read the list to Jack. "Be cheerful. Lessen sorrow and give hope. Be brave. Put aside your own feelings. And don't give up." I think those are kind of good lessons to follow even today. "Follow that list," said the nurse, "and you can't go wrong." The nurse took the pot of coffee from the fire and carried it to the line of men. "Follow," said Jack. "Follow that list." "Yes, that's what she said," said Annie. Jack took the list from her. "Don't you get it?" he said. "This is it. We found it. The special writing for Morgan's library. Something to follow." "Yes," said Annie. Jack put the paper into his knapsack. "It was handed right to us," he said, smiling. "We can go home now." "Oh, no, not now," said Annie. We have to help these nurses first." "But Annie," said Jack. She picked up the food basket. Then she started toward a row of white tents. "Wait, we're supposed to leave," said Jack. "Our mission is over." The truth was that he didn't want to help. He didn't want to be around wounded soldiers. It was too sad. "Bring the water bucket and the ladle," Annie shouted. Then she disappeared inside the first tent. Oh, Jack groaned. He knew he couldn't change her mind. He pulled out the list and read the first line. "Be cheerful." "Oh, brother," he said. Jack put the list back into his knapsack. He picked up the heavy bucket. Hurrying clumsily after Annie, he tried to smile. Chapter 4. Freedom Fighters. Jack carried the water bucket into the tent. The scene inside was like a nightmare to him. The tent was hot and stuffy. A dozen injured soldiers lay on small cots. Some called for food. Some just wanted water. Jack wanted to rush back outside, but Annie got right to work. She rolled up her sleeves, and she smiled. "Hi, everybody," she said cheerfully. None of the soldiers smiled back. "I have good news," she said. "We've brought lunch." Annie moved down the row of cots. She handed out pieces of bread and chunks of potatoes to all the patients. "You'll be feeling better soon," she said to one sick man. "You'll see your family again," she told another. Jack looked around nervously. He wasn't sure what to do. "Give them water, Jack," Annie called to him. Jack saw a tin cup beside one man's cot. He picked the cup up. Carefully, he used the ladle and filled it with water. Keeping his eyes down, Jack handed the cup to the patient. He felt shy and uncomfortable. He didn't know what to say. Jack moved on to the next patient, then the next. He gave each wounded man a cup of water, but he never looked right at any of them or spoke a word. Soon Jack and Annie had finished passing out food and water. "Goodbye," Annie said. Jack waved and left the tent. She waved and left the tent. Jack quickly followed her. "Let's go home now," he begged once they were outside. "We've got what we came for." "If we leave now, the patients in the next tent will go hungry and thirsty," said Annie. Jack sighed. "Okay, but after we take care of them, we're leaving for sure." He followed Annie into the next tent. Just like the last tent, it was filled with wounded soldiers. But the soldiers in this tent were all African Americans. "Hi, everybody," Annie said, smiling warmly. Again, she passed out potatoes and bread. She also talked and made jokes. Jack poured water into each of the tin cups. Again, he didn't speak to any of the soldiers, but he handed out the last cup, and then a patient spoke to him. "Thank you for your kindness, son," the soldier said. Jack glanced shyly at the man on the cot. He was an elderly, silver-haired black man. "You're welcome," said Jack. He tried to think of something else to say. He remembered Annie's cheerful words. "You'll get well soon," he told the patient. "You'll be with your family again." The man shook his head. "No, I'll never be with my family again," he said quietly. "My wife and children, they were sold long ago." "Sold?" said Jack. "Yes, we were slaves," the man said. "You were a slave?" asked Jack. "All of us in this tent were once slaves," the man said. "We ran away from our owners in the South to fight to end slavery, to fight for freedom for our people. I ran barefoot for over 30 miles to tell the Union soldiers that the Confederates were going to attack." And then the man fell silent. "You're a brave freedom fighter," said Jack. "Thank you, son." The man closed his eyes. Jack wanted to know more about slavery, but he didn't want to bother the weary patient. He pulled out his Civil War book. He found a picture of African Americans standing on a platform. The men, women, and children were standing with their hands and feet in chains. Jack read. Again, this is the factual part. In the 1800s, the United States was divided over the issue of slavery. The North wanted the country to end all slavery, but the South wanted to keep slaves because more than 4 million slaves worked in huge plantation fields. This disagreement between the North and the South led to the Civil War. Now remember, we read about Abraham Lincoln, and he was president during this time. Jack looked down at the man's face. He looked very weary. Jack pulled the nurse's list of rules from his knapsack. Lessen, sorrow, and give hope, he read. Jack put the list away. He leaned close to the man and spoke in a soft voice. One day your great-great-grandchildren will be doctors and lawyers, he said. The man's eyes opened. He went on. They'll help run the government and schools. They'll be senators and generals and teachers and principals. The man stared hard into Jack's eyes. Can you see into the future, son? He asked. Jack nodded. Well, in a way, he said. The man then smiled a beautiful smile. Thank you, son, he said, and then he closed his eyes again. Good luck, whispered Jack. He hoped the brave man would live to enjoy freedom. Ready to go home now, Jack? Said Annie. She had finished passing out the food. Jack nodded. As he and Annie stepped out of the tent, they heard someone shout, She's back! A horse-drawn wagon was barreling into the camp. Who's back? Asked Annie. Clara Barton, a patient said. She runs this hospital. Clara Barton, said Annie. I don't believe it. Who's Clara Barton? Asked Jack. He'd heard the name before, but he couldn't remember who she was. Who's Clara Barton? Asked Annie. Are you nuts? And she ran to meet the wagon. Okay, come back tomorrow for Chapter 5, called Angel in the Battlefield. But I also want to remind you that tomorrow is April 1st, April Fool's Day. So plan some kind of fun little April Fool's joke for the people in your household, the people that you love, and the people that you see every day. And laugh together and have a great day. So, hope to see you tomorrow. Thanks for tuning in. Bye-bye.